The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian, Mr. Betcher, and Miss Berlin for Breaking Down Security this week.
Oh.
Hey.
How have you all been doing? For those of you who listen to the show, it's, we just were on, 2-3 weeks ago. But yeah, for us, it's been almost a month. So how's everybody been doing?
Great. Busy. I got my COVID booster shot on Friday and took a long nap on Saturday.
Nice. I got mine on Tuesday, and with the exception of a bit of arm pain, I couldn't tell, but so far I've been lucky enough that it hasn't just set me on my ass. So it's I got the Moderna one. The doctor I went to at the site was like, oh yeah, you should mix it up. It's probably a good idea. And I was like, okay, 2 Pfizers and a Moderna. I'm sure that's fine. So that worked out fairly well. So Mr. Betcher, how are you doing?
Good. So 2 Pfizers and a Moderna. That's like taking pills with different active ingredients for the same ailment, right? So I'm going to take 2 Advil, 2 Tylenol,
Yeah.
I just want to get one of everything. Just make it, make it super interesting.
Start out with
the
JJ.
What'll kill me and then back it off a little.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. We got lucky. We dodged a bullet here. We were supposed to get snow all week, but something happened, and now we're back to just typical rain for the remaining weeks. So we're getting down here to the end of the year, and I think this, and then I think we maybe have one more episode that we're going to be talking, and then we're going to take a couple weeks off at the end of December here so that we can enjoy the time off and spend some time with family, because I guess family's important, as Miss Berlin knows, and Mr. Betcher and myself. So we are so this is not going to be a lighthearted topic tonight, and this comes from a fairly it's something that affects me in a profound sense, because it's something that I have been involved with in the past 2 months or so, and there's been a lot of talk recently in the news about IoT devices and surveillance and using those things in many cases. Many of you have probably read about the Apple AirTags and them. The fact that they're small and they pretty much have a GPS in them, or they have the ability to be integrated into an ecosystem of Apple iDevices and could allow people to do things like find lost keys or their dog, or hunt up where their car's lost in the stadium of their favorite sports arena. These are all great things that they can do, but as many people, especially from a security bent, often start thinking about is how they can be used for nefarious purposes. And one of those things that came out in a news article recently on AirTags was lady found one in her bag, and come to find out it was owned by somebody that was stalking her. And these things are getting smaller, they're getting more powerful, they have a lot of functionality. And one of the things that I wanted to do, because this is not just one show that we're going to do. This is going to be a series of shows. We actually have a couple of people who are going to be on after the first of the year to kind of talk about some of the technology and the legal issues around this as well after the first of the year. But we invited Litmoose on because as I was trying to ask in a way that wasn't completely awful, instead of going on Twitter and saying, hey, have you been stalked? Tell me about it. I was trying to ask some nice ways of saying, hey, what does that look like for people? Do they have shared accounts if they're being, stalked or what have you? So somebody had mentioned, hey, you should probably talk to Litmoose. And I was like, great. And so I reached out to her and she was more than willing to come on. So Litmoose, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Cool. Would you like to tell people about your background, how you got into security, and what's your what part of the stalking or anti-stalking portions is important to you in that respect.
Sure, absolutely, and I'll keep it short because the way into security was long and convoluted. But long story short, security was, like many of you, not my first career. I've been bouncing around quite a bit. One of the things I did in an early career is I was an autopsy technician, so I got to see kind of the ugly very early in life, and it boosted me into security. And I didn't want to see people on their worst day anymore. And so even in stalking and having been a victim of stalking, I knew, what happens on the worst case. So even though I kind of sideways in IT of wearing many hats, went from network admin, sysadmin, project manager, QA, dev, what have you, into DFIR, which is what I do now. I work as an IR consultant for CrowdStrike. But I've always on the side had classes and taught and advocated for anti-stalking, and worked with victims of domestic violence and stalking. And it was one of my earliest forensic projects, actually, was finding artifacts on IoT devices, on phones, in cars, things like that, and then teaching on how to look for them and how to protect against them. And that's kind of where I am today. I still do it on the side. I'm just not as vocal about it, but I appreciate this so much more than you know.
Cool. Okay. So for those of you who are potentially victims of stalkers or dealing with domestic violence in some cases, there are some numbers in our show notes. If you are needing help from people, you can definitely reach out to those numbers, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can either find ways out of those kinds of things and kind of go dark in some respects, or find ways to claw back some of that privacy. And this is a podcast not meant to help people who are stalkers or domestic abusers. If you are one of those people, I want you to die in a fire. So please die in a fire if you're a domestic abuser or a stalker. So
well said.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So some statistics I looked up from stalkingawareness.org. These are from 2019. I'm assuming, and some of the other research I saw said that the pandemic has only made these things worse. But an estimated 6 to 7.5 million people are stalked in a 1-year period in the United States. 1 in 6 women and 1 in 17 men have experienced some kind of stalking victimization at some point in their lifetime. Using a less conservative definition of stalking, which considers any amount of fear, 1 in 4 women or 1 in 13 men reported being a victim of stalking in their lifetime. And half of all stalking victims indicated they were stalked before the age of 25.
It says a definition of stalking, and that's why I mentioned the word fear, but it is a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear.
Right. So Litmus, what's the how is that still accurate today? I mean, these are almost 3 years old statistics, but I mean, has it actually gotten worse, or is that pretty much track with what's going on today?
So it tracks, but I would say it's gotten worse, because if you look at the ability to stalk now you have cyber stalking as well. So just because somebody has left your vicinity physically, now there's that online component that happens, right? And whether or not they're directly affecting you physically, doesn't mean that they're not affecting you mentally. And that fear portion does come into play in that definition, where somebody can actually make you feel fear very, very easily online through different applications. And the more that we become online as a culture, I would say the more that feeling increases, and kind of the propensity for stalking to increase as well.
Okay. Yeah. So the statistics that I mentioned, I believe, are U.S. based. There are other links in our notes to other. The U.K. I think had published some statistics as well. The problem with the stalking is that they said 1.5 million people in 2019, 3.6% of adults aged 16 to 74 have experienced stalking in the last year. That was in England and Wales. So about 1.5 million people. So 977,000 women, roughly half a million men as well. So, and we're not just assuming, like Litmus said, not just cyber stalking, but, relationship or people who are familiar with one another, family members, not just stalking, but keeping track of people then when they don't want to be monitored and that kind of thing. So the problem with stalking though is so Litmus, the problem with the stalking is that law enforcement often can't do anything until a crime has occurred, and it's hard to prove a crime has occurred until something really bad has happened, right?
Correct. And there has to be evidence. So one of the ways that folks can do that, and especially no matter which side of the fence you're on, if you're helping a victim or if you are a victim, there is a stalking form online that basically you can document every instance that somebody either contacts you unwantedly or is in your vicinity in an unwanted way. And basically, if you start it by saying, I don't ever want to hear from you again, stop, cease, it doesn't have to be, as long as any, person can read this and see clearly they don't want to be bothered, you then start documenting dates, times, everything that's happening. And the problem with stalking is usually there's an escalation point. And
Right.
Why this gets so dangerous is because you can start out with a stalking victim that very quickly escalates into a domestic violence victim or worse. And so trying to prevent that before that crime is committed, really it comes down to what kind of security folks do best, which is documentation and time stamping and logs and things that we normally talk about. That's our comfort zone. And so we're kind of a good use case for reaching out and kind of being a mitigating factor. Not saying that we can replace law enforcement in this way, because definitely legal action is what helps these victims, but we can provide that kind of logging to law enforcement in order to have an effect like a restraining order or what have you.
And those
Right.
are really important. You may not think they are. Like, okay, I wrote this down, but who's going to believe me, right? The law enforcement can correlate, say, the GPS of the perpetrator's phone and your phone and see that they're in the same place, and that matches with the time and date that you have on your log. That may be a year old, right? So that goes a long way. The writing down in a logbook, that is admissible.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I think has gotten really large, like in the last few years, has been the IoT devices. Not just as we mentioned, finding dogs with or car keys or whatever, like the air tags and stuff. But there's other technology that once you've we had a story about in the show notes from a gentleman in the UK who they had separated, and the wife and her child were still living in the house, and he had started making changes to the home entertainment centers or the HVAC system. So there's a lot of ways of generating that fear or to create the unwanted behavior in that respect. So let me see what we got here. We've got a bunch of PDFs. There's a lot of white papers in our documents. One of them was tech abuse. So there's one from London dated November 2018 about gender and IoT research report, the rise of the Internet of Things and implications for technology facilitated abuse. talking about various ways that people, need to understand how these things are. Do you think that? So I'm just put this out to everybody. Ms. Berlin, I'll start with you. Do companies that create IoT devices not take into account, you think, these kinds of use cases, or I'm sorry, not use cases, but abuse cases in this case, because that they're using it to the detriment? Do they consider these to be outlier events that are not, like, well, we'll deal with that when we come across it?
I don't think it's just IoT. I think it's literally every piece of hardware or software or website or app or anything like that. I think a lot of times that even angle isn't even thought of. What was the instant messaging app that was, maybe it was Wire or one of the ones that was out there? Like, you didn't necessarily have to friend somebody for them to like find you or send information, or I can't remember which one it was, but basically, like, they didn't think in their feature set about abuse in general, right? I mean, if the first thing, if you come up with something like that, just thinking, okay, how could this be abused, or how could this put the user in danger? And I think a lot of times it's just completely overlooked, because I mean, usually their hearts are always in the right place, right? They're like, oh, this is going to solve a problem. This is going to, empower people, or this is going to do, be the next greatest thing. But they're never like, oh, this could definitely be used to stalk somebody, or definitely be used to send unwanted, messages or files or something like that. And I think it happens a lot. A lot of them are like, DM features on websites, or like, oh, I don't have the ability to block this person and they can send me stuff no matter what, as long as they know who I am. I don't think a lot of times that's even thought of when something's being created.
Right.
Or maybe it is, and they're just like, oh well, or oh, that'll never happen.
Right. Moose, how about you?
I would agree, and I would add into the IoT portion of it. I think more and more for marketability, we're just seeing IoT devices in general created with, can I use this from my phone, and how easy is it to set up with my phone? And it really is that ease of use and linked to my phone, because it's the thing that's in your pocket all the time. I am most impressed when a company comes out with something and there is a good way to keep other people from necessarily coming into your Bluetooth. It's not like it's locked down. There's not that Bluetooth capability. I can't just go and like steal my neighbor's things. I had a war with my neighbor at one point because I found out the RF frequency of our fans were the same, and they kept turning on my fan. So I decided to haunt their house. Things like that, where I don't think that manufacturers are really thinking about anything other than, how do I get this in as many hands as possible? And really that comes down to what's in everybody's hands, and that's a phone.
Right. Mr. Betcher, how about yourself?
Well, when you were mentioning the messaging apps, I found an article that said Facebook Messenger, Signal, Google Duo, GeoChat, and Mocha are all these chat apps that have had problems in the past where they let people eavesdrop on a victim, right? So all of these have been patched, but they do have a history of having these vulnerabilities, and they could come up in the future as well, or there could be some vulnerabilities in them right now that we don't know about.
So. Right. Could it be that when they're doing these threat models, and unless, so not to belabor the point, but if they've never actually been stalked, they wouldn't necessarily think about that. As a white male, I'm not a person that would necessarily be stalked, except for my celebrity here on the internet or whatever, such as it is. But if unless you've actually been stalked or been a victim of domestic violence or domestic abuse, those things wouldn't even think in your mind, right? And when people come at this from a privacy point of view, oh, I don't want to be surveilled, I don't want to be surveilled. But if you're building technology into IoT devices so that surveillance is not a thing, how do you put that fine line between not being able to track who's actually doing the stalking and creating that anonymity or that privacy? There has to be a way to, you can't do both. Some of these things run counter to one another. Like if you find a device on yourself and it's an AirTag, for instance, or I think one of the other ones that was mentioned was a tile system. What do you do with it? Is it lost? Can it be scanned to find out who is, connected to that device? Is it tamper resistant so that it would, give out an alert to your stalker if, you opened it or cracked it open? My first thought was, well, how well do they microwave? Or how well do they get, how well do they stand up against a ball peen hammer? Or, I was thinking of other things when I was looking through these documents about how would I, what would I do with a device like that? It's like some people would say, oh, well, somebody lost this, I want to give it back. But if you're, if you find it on your person or in your car or whatever, even if they beep or whatever, it's not very loud, those kinds of things. There are notifications like in the AirTags after so many days, they start beeping as if they're lost, if they're not around the owner. So how do we create a device or an IoT system that would be create that anonymity and still have that functionality and also have that anti-stalker kind of feature put in where it's like, you can know if there's one near you or you're being tracked by these things. It's a really, really hard feature set to build both at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's an answer.
Well, what do you build for? The 99% of people are going to use it to find their dogs, or and I don't like saying this, but it is an outlier to be using these as stalker features. And so they're building for the 99% or the 95+%. They're not building for the 5%. That's a I wouldn't say statistical anomaly, but they're building it to, find keys and dogs and, lost things, not, against the stalker, or the privacy issue there. So,
I mean, it beeping after a certain amount of time that it's not close to, like, that's a great, not solution, but it's a great feature, right? You don't want to have to, you don't want it to be able to like stay quiet and hidden for forever, right? I mean, I'll have to ask. I had one friend that her abusive partner had planted one in her vehicle, and she didn't find it for weeks until after they broke up, because he was still near the car every now and then. So like,
right.
Even that's not going to fix it all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you can put those in somebody's car and, put a piece of tape up under a wheel well or something. They don't even have to be in the car physically. I mean, we've, not to use law enforcement as an example, but they could use these things too, to track people, or to be able to, geolocate these things. I know they have specialized equipment to be able to do that stuff. But, if they needed a quick and dirty way of doing these things, it just seems to me that they would be able to, put one of these things, magnetically, connected to a car or something like that, and be able to do this tracking. So, Limus, we were having you on for a couple of reasons. One of them was we wanted to talk about being able to claw back, from a personal security standpoint, and we know you have some experience doing some of this, sadly. When you're working with people who are leaving these relationships, what are some of the first things that you try to help them understand? I mean, there must be a few things that you tell them to do, like, do this immediately or what have you.
Well, absolutely. So part of the problem, and the first question I always ask is, are you still in a relationship or still in proximity with this person? And the reason I ask that is because there can be some danger if they find out that they are now cutting ties and what's going to happen if they start changing accounts and everything like that. So we have a long talk about where they're currently standing and where they're comfortable being. Are they in the same location that the person had access to? Do they still have access? Some state laws, I'll give an example. Texas, I was living there. Texas, if you are married to someone, they have the right to be in your location because it's joint property unless you have a restraining order or a cease and desist, something legally. So before you set those boundaries, you almost have to have the evidence. It's a catch-22. So in working with people, you really do have to tiptoe and see, okay, what can we feasibly do? I'll go with the worst case, which is that person's still there and we have to be careful. And that's duplication. Start setting up duplicative accounts for other things that when you do have to, cut, you've completely cut and it's all at once. And you're not doing it one by one. You can, stop using GPS so much. We rely on it so much. You can, just in incognito mode, look at where you're going to go on Google before you go there, write out your directions, things that we used to do that we've forgotten how to do. But I'm old enough to say it, like I didn't have a cell phone. So
Right.
go back to the old ways, do some of those things, but then also, as much as you can, stay calm and know that you're not alone. You're not the first person that's gone through this. It's the way's been paved before you, and you don't have to wait for a set number of instances that make you feel unsafe to start having that conversation with law enforcement. And it doesn't really matter what, it does matter. Not everybody is comfortable with law enforcement. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there because that's the elephant in the room, right? And sometimes the person stalking you is with law enforcement. So that gets even trickier.
I can tell you that from experience.
Same. So it gets to be this tricky thing. But I will say this, you're better having as much on record as possible that you've done something and that you've tried to start this. And if you go into a police department and you say, I feel unsafe and I want a record of it, guess what they have to do? Their records department has to record it. You now have a timestamp and a piece of evidence, and you've started the process. And that start to the process is the first step in making sure that if you need a restraining order, you can get one. If you need a safe house, you can get help. And if if it's happening in a different county and you feel safer in another county, go to the other county. Law enforcement does vary from place to place, from city to city. Do not, I think that the hardest part of this is people feeling like they're stuck and they have no out. And I will say that it becomes financially limiting depending on how much dependency that person has to either the other person or a job and a locale, or children. There are so many factors that we don't realize how entangled folks get when it comes to stalking that they can't cut those ties. And it really takes creativity. And I have a long list of questions I ask, basically.
Do you have could you maybe give us a couple of those, or maybe
Sure.
where do you interview them at? Because obviously if they're being potentially stalked or kept tabs on, diverting to a coffee house that the person's never been to before, or what have you. I'm imagining you're doing this like very clandestine, like you're in the supermarket and during the weekly shopping or something, and you just happen to meet them at the supermarket, and while you're all checking out cantaloupes or something, you're asking these questions or talking to them. I actually think that if you could find ways to do that, that would be the easiest way of doing it.
That is typically my method. That and I have taken up crocheting with quite a few victims where we have a stitch and bitch, which is a term for crochet. Oh, I'm
Okay.
so sorry. Hopefully I
No.
can swear on this. Okay.
No. Fuck. There you go.
Excellent.
Okay,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Now that
All
we've
right.
cleared the air, I can be myself. No. So
Time to break out the whiskey.
there we go. Oh, Amanda knows me. So I tend to come in. I can fly under the radar a little bit easier when you read the statistics. You know this. I'm not saying anything. It's a little bit unfair. I'm a woman. So I tend to fly under the radar as a woman helping women more so than if a man were to meet up with a woman at a coffee shop, she might get in more trouble.
Right.
So I'm able to do what I do, and I realize that I have that privileged approach because I can just low and slow, hey, I'm meeting up with one of my girlfriends, and she can kind of have that out without arousing too much suspicion. Online knitting groups, I've used like Facebook groups that were knitting groups as a cover, as a front. If I can get them in person, great. If I can't, setting them up with some code words like for them to let me know whether or not they're okay. And then, posting in a group setting rather than in a one-on-one setting. Hey, here are some resources. Oh, this is happening to me. And then making it about me and walking through my process and then, having them consume it, but not having it on record in a message to them directly. So I've had to get creative about the ways I go about it. In person is the easiest thing to do. That's why you noted at the beginning of this show, hey, things have gotten worse over the pandemic. That is one of the reasons why. Is folks have felt like they're trapped with someone, they can't leave. There's not as many places they can go, and they're not meeting up with folks in the same way where you couldn't just say during the pandemic, hey, I'm going out for coffee with one of my girlfriends. Like that became a move that you couldn't make anymore.
Right. Yeah, I had made the comment on Twitter about remote work being something that would help stalking victims because they could, work remotely. If they have a job, and they have an ass in a seat, it's hard to create that separation if your stalker, your whoever the asshole is, has that anchor there where they know, well, that person's always going to have to come to work or they're not going to be working anymore or what have you. So so there was a lot made not just of IoT devices but like spyware. You've got the NSO group. I mean, this to the nth degree. I mean, we're talking like nation state stuff with NSO group, but there are other apps out there that are fairly well known as like, you can share your location. If you're using an exercise watch, I have a smart watch myself, so it keeps track of my GPS and stuff. Sadly, when you're talking to these people, is that something you tell them? Turn off the GPS on your phone, but oh yeah, don't forget you've got a fucking Apple Watch or you have a Samsung watch or something. You also need to turn it off there because that can be done. I mean, do people forget, oh yeah, that also tracks me, or oh yeah, my Tesla is, doing this and we have the same Tesla app, so I can figure out where exactly the car is based on, X, Y, and Z?
They forget about all of it. And more apps track GPS than I think most folks are aware. I had when I first gave a talk on this, I think back in 2018 or 2019, I forget, 2018. I finally came out about it because I had a lot of anxiety about, am I going to fuel stalkers if I give away kind of my trade secrets? And the answer to me was, no, they're not paying attention to me anyway. And if they are, it's still going to be harder for them, and I'd rather reach the victims. So when I started giving away, ways to see it, one of my big ones was Snapchat. Snapchat allows you to open up a little map where you can see where the person is if you don't turn that feature off. That was right. That was a big one that people just were not aware that it was a feature. They'll forget about their cars. They'll use GPS in their car and it's linked to their phone. If somebody else gets in their car, starts the car, you can toggle, different locations where that car has been pretty easily. It was one of my parlor tricks with rental cars where I'd show people, hey, look at this cool thing I can do. Apps 100%, IoT even, if you're separated, you've moved out from somebody, but you still have an iTunes backup password that person has, you have it linked to Nest or what have you, in-home thermostat, they might be able to tell when you come and go, based on what you set things to. So there's so much to think about, and so many ways that folks don't think about it until it's being used against them for the most part.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I had so before we started recording, I had asked a question that I had some unrealistic ideas on how things work. But if, somebody leaves their relationship and they have to get out of that house and they go to a domestic violence shelter, I had an idea that, the folks who do that stuff would, potentially confiscate phones and, potentially not have the car driven to the shelter and things like that for fear of IoT. But, one of the things that, I was thinking about was, burner phones, for instance, was a thing, but, if you're trying to take back whatever privacy you have, you're going to get a burner phone with a brand new Google account or an Android or an Apple account or whatever. And then you're going to have to, create an email account, which is, if you don't have an Android account, then you're creating an iMail account. What are is there a way of actually, I don't know. So the phones will require you to have an account to set up the phones, which is a pain in the ass, unless it's like a pay as you go. But are there ways of doing that so that people are not easily, myself, if I had a burner phone, first thing I'd do is I'd log back into my original account, which would defeat the whole purpose of doing so. But are there things that they can do to make sure that, once they've made that cut, that they could, potentially reclaim those accounts later on? Because I've had my Google account since 2003. So, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of stuff there. Would they be able to get that back in the future, or should they just consider that compromised and burnt?
I usually, if it's bad enough, burn it. If they have photos or things that they're trying to recover, usually that's where you get the most like heartbreak, where people are like, I want this account because I have this data that's associated with it. If you're going to do that route, go through a trusted friend. But honestly, that is not even great, because if that friend then transmits it to you, to your new accounts, like you then have a chain. So you really, I encourage people, if it's bad enough, burn the old account, basically burn the ties of whatever digital footprint you had before, really lock things down. And that gets hard for folks, because you're asking them to get off social media with their friends as well, and you're only as secure as your friends are too, right? To a degree. Right. So there's push and shove when it comes to that. But the better answer that I have for them, because I'll say, look, you're probably going to get it back on Facebook at some point, or Twitter or Instagram or what have you. Lie about everything. Your name is no longer your name. Your birthday is not your birthday. Your location, definitely not your location. Lie out the teeth as much as you can on those things. Don't give it your real information. It doesn't require it. So
right.
That's right. Probably the middle ground that I come to with these folks.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ms. Berlin, you had mentioned you had a friend or two. When your friend decided to leave that relationship, how did, and she found the tracker a couple of weeks ago or weeks later, and that, what did she tell you about that, or did she ask you about these things? Were you the person that she turned to help get out of the relationship, or was it just you found out after the fact?
Yeah, I found out after the fact. So how she found out, she actually found the logbook that he was logging every time and date of where she went.
Oh.
Yeah, so like she would go to work or go meet clients or whatever. And she traveled a lot. And it was just like down to the minute she found this logbook. She's like, how do they know like where I'm going? And then was able to find the tracker.
Yeah.
After that.
Okay.
Yeah. And like, I tried to, she did eventually, but not right away. I'm like, you need, granted, there's not, not for sure, but you probably should wipe your phone, check shared accounts, all that kind of stuff. So, thankfully it didn't turn into domestic violence situation, but easily could have.
Right. Yeah. I wondered about shared accounts, because it's like, if you are trying to create that and somebody is a controlling asshole, would they even allow the kind of freedom to have their own Amazon accounts or Apple iTunes accounts or whatever, Facebook accounts? Are you sharing all those things?
Oh yeah.
What is that, and what are your options there if you have all of that connected? Me and my wife, for years we've had separate finances, so God forbid she ever wanted to leave me, I'd be a mess. But she could pretty much go with no issues. I could go with no issues. But that's not the case with everybody. Your credit cards are tied up. Your money is, everything's in joint accounts. So it's like, what do you do at that point?
I wish that's the one thing I wish I could have told younger me. Right.
What's that?
Like, keep separate finances.
Keep it separated.
Right. Because that's just one thing. Like, I don't know if it's my generation or just the age or whatever. And the thought of like, oh, well, if I have separate finances, that just means I don't trust my partner. And that's not really the case. You can completely trust somebody and keep your own money.
Right.
And then when if you ever happen to have to leave or whatever, you won't, lose out on everything, because you'll actually still have some kind of financial support.
Right. So Moose, you met these people online. What if they don't have a support system like this? Obviously, family members probably aren't the best, because it's like, oh, they're not a bad person or whatever. I don't know what that person is. I've never seen anything like that.
Exactly.
They're not a bad person. Right. They're sympathetic to the other person, not necessarily
exactly.
You're the crazy one.
Yep.
Where do you find, is it the finding a group or finding something else outside of your friend, even your own friends may be like, well, no, you're crazy. He's okay. Would it be just finding almost a complete stranger, well, like yourself, to go to?
It's different for everyone on what they can and do latch onto as they're going through this. But they definitely need some kind of support system. Thankfully, and I'll talk a little bit about this. Thankfully, a lot of groups are popping up for this, and fortunately and unfortunately, a large number are women's groups, and this does happen to men as well. I get very scared for men that this happens to, actually, because I feel like there's even less support there. But there's a website called stalkingawareness.org, and it's Spark that runs it. They have some groups, they have training modules, victim resources, things like that. But honestly, they'll have someone, almost every single one has an old friend or even acquaintance or a coworker, someone that they can trust that does not know the partner is usually what I recommend, is somebody that does not know the partner that they can kind of lean on as a resource. And typically, just because of some of the escalations that come out of these, I will make the recommendation that if it can be someone of the same sex, do that, just to keep them safer if there's jealousy involved and if there's going to be an escalation.
Yeah. the stats I quoted were from Stalking Awareness. It was actually a
Oh,
site.
nice. Okay.
They have really good search engine optimization apparently, because they came up almost immediately. So,
Excellent.
yeah. Yeah. So there's, I think, yeah, I mean, it's one of the other things I would guess is that you're going to have to be very subtle once you start planning your escape, because if you start making major changes, or you're, all of a sudden you're acting funny, it might spook the person, and and might make them think that something is up. It might, you might want to, find a way, get your burner phone if you can, pay with cash whenever you can, start stockpiling, escape money potentially, if that's a thing. Or would you suggest weapons?
No. And here's why, is if it can be used against you, it might be used against you. And that's my personal opinion. I don't usually recommend weapons because it can lead to escalations that don't necessarily need to happen. If at all possible, if you're completely stuck, you can't go anywhere, you can't go to another location, they know where you are, you are feeling that level of unsafe, and you research the laws and you are comfortable handling a weapon, and I mean trained with it. That's the biggest caveat, is trained with it, then you can consider it. But I would much rather someone remove themselves from a situation, because if you're at the point of talking life and death, take yourself and the things you care about and go out of state. And I know that can be cost prohibitive, but it can be done. And I say that as somebody having left a state at 4:30 in the morning with 3 cats in a pickup truck. So,
Wow.
this is, it's, you have to weigh your options, but if at all possible, I would recommend against weapons, because we're at a point to where we can get creative, and it shouldn't have to come to that if you're talking to them early on.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good advice. I know a bit about handguns, and there are ways to grab the handgun even if it's pointed at you, and know for a fact that it's not going to go off no matter how hard you pull that trigger, right? Especially revolvers. And if you haven't trained with a weapon, if you're just going to go buy one and use it, no, you're getting yourself into a much bigger problem at that point. You have to be trained how to use that weapon first, right?
Right. Okay. Well, I assume that, let me see, what I have one other thing down here. It's a smarter connected.
Oh, by the way,
Go ahead.
I was looking online. I got some ideas as you were talking about slipping things in handbags, and I think a great project would be, you can buy some Faraday material online, and if you could if you're good with sewing or whatnot, you can make handbags, purses, and stuff that if someone does slip something in your purse, it's not going to do anything because it is a Faraday cage. So if you wanted to take your purse apart and line it, they do have bags that are made, but they don't really have special Faraday purses where people wouldn't actually know what they are. But if you could sew, you could line the bag with this special material. No one would know.
That's brilliant.
Seems like there might be a clothing line or a bag line or something like that in the works for somebody doing some items like that, where it's like, I have a wallet, I think, that has, foil in it to protect against NFC chips and stuff, but they have to be manufactured a specific way for that to completely block things, right? I mean,
well, you buy the material, so you can cut it to whatever size.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
It's Faraday fabric.
Oh, very nice. Okay. Probably copper lined or something like that, yeah. That's one. So yeah, I mean, with the IoT devices being able to block those, that's one thing that's always bothered me. It's like the use cases was like, well, you need to be able to get those things back to somebody. And I'm like, I ain't going to do that kind of shit. I'm going to take a ball peen hammer to it. I mean, it's a $30 product. If they were worried about losing it, they would have done a better job of keeping track of it. And if I find it on my person, it's damn sure going to get ball peen because I don't even know who the hell would put it on me. So makes me want to go out and check my car now, as a matter of fact. God damn it.
Speaking of, if they ask you for an undercarriage wash, you say yes.
Undercarriage wash.
Yes.
Like driving through the car
Drive
wash.
through a car wash, do the undercarriage wash.
Yep.
Like
Nice.
that
High-powered
is
jets.
always do the undercarriage wash.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yep.
All right. Very cool. I don't know how much I assume that we've not even done this justice. I feel like that we've forgotten a lot of things. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to touch on, Moose?
Honestly, this is just amazing that folks are talking about it and that they're concerned about it, because the more that we can get this out there as a use case and remind people, hey, as convenient and wonderful as some of these things can be, here's the bad. And I think that talking about the good, bad, and the ugly is so important when it comes to something that could, we're in security. If it can affect somebody's safety, then it's worth it. I think you're right, though. This scratches the surface. As far as adding anything to it, I would say I would double down and just say, hey, check out your resources that you've posted along with this after this recording, after somebody listens to the podcast, and definitely check those out, and know that even if you don't know about it, because of those statistics, somebody that is in your inner circle has been affected by stalking or is being affected right now. And so, be open to having those conversations and checking on your friends, especially, we're not completely out of this pandemic yet.
Right. And try to, if somebody does come to you and they haven't listened to this and the other person, don't dismiss it out of hand that there's not a problem. So anyway, okay. Well, if people wanted to ask more questions, or maybe you got a couple talks online, how would they find that information?
Ooh. I think the recording for my original is B-Sides DFW 2018. And that should be online. I can post it. They can find me through Twitter @litmoose. And I am open to any questions on anti-stalking and stalking prevention, or even if you find yourself being a victim and you can't reach out to folks and you're having trouble, please, my door is open. And I work too much, but I have a good network. So even if it's not me, we'll get you the help you need.
Right. And, like Lit Moose said, I'm white male, so don't, if you are in trouble, feel free to reach out, but I will definitely, if you are not a white male or another male person, I can definitely pass you on to Lit Moose. That way you can keep up appearances, if you will, on those things. And cool. We appreciate you coming on the show. As I said, this was not going to be a very positive show, or not a very upbeat show. And I apologize for some of our listeners who might feel negatively towards that, but you can, go kiss my ass. So, Miss Berlin, I saw some stuff online on LinkedIn. You're going to be doing some training in the near future for Wild West Hackenfest, I believe.
Yeah.
Through
Anti-Siphon, we're doing our defense and detection tabletop exercise training.
And I think that starts
next week.
Okay.
Tuesday
So hopefully
through Friday, the 7th through the 10th.
Okay. Will you be giving that somewhere else as well? Because by the time this goes out, it's going to be after that's over.
Yeah,
so I'm sure it went well.
Definitely.
So yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
keep a lookout through. Is it Anti-Siphon is always going to be doing it, or are you just doing it with them sponsoring you?
We do it through our own devices. like direct to companies. So we actually just sent out a quote to a very large agency to do several versions of it internal. So which I'm super excited about. But yeah, lots of places. That's the only current one scheduled, I think. So
right on. Okay. And if people wanted to get a hold of you about all of your things that you're doing, your mental health hackers, your incident response tabletop stuff, and just maybe you yourself, how would they find you?
So at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR, and at Hackers Health are the two majority accounts.
Okay. InfoSec Roleplay, I think, is the IR one, right? Okay.
Yes.
And you can all mark off the toilet flushing in my the adjacent.
Oh, I didn't even hear it.
Oh, good. Okay. So
you trade yourself.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm disappointed now that I don't live near the train tracks. Like, we can't mark off bingo for train tracks. But if we were to ever record during the day, there is a quarry down the street for me, and it shakes my entire house when they do quarry blasting.
Oh my God.
It's a new kind of noise.
Wow. Okay. It's like if you live in San Diego, in North County in San Diego, when they're doing ammo shooting, like howitzer type shit at Camp Pendleton, it causes explosions and earthquakes and stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
And I just don't know anything about any of this. I live in a very quiet city. I'm in New York, so there's no noise at all.
No,
at any time.
I doubt it.
Yeah. You like live in the city, or you live?
I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Close.
Wow.
Trust me, close enough. It's noisy.
Okay. Wow.
So,
fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Betcher, tell us about LogMD and how would we get a hold of you on Twitter?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is @BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. The website is log-md.com. And yeah, Amanda, you might have to line your house with this Faraday fabric, protects against EMPs and all that stuff from your explosions.
Yep. Cool. All right. Before we go, a few announcements. Thank you to John Keese. He's one of our Patreon donors. He created he's supporting us on BreakSec here. His donation was very much appreciated. It goes to help us, maintain the community that we have, put out a weekly podcast with excellent content like what Moose had put out here. Most of you don't, may think this isn't a big deal, but this could, potentially save a life at some point in the future, or give somebody the confidence to get out of whatever relationship they're in. So I'd like to thank all of our Patreon donors for helping, helping us do that as a public service. You can find our podcast at BreakSec on Twitter, BRAKESEC. Our website is www.breakingsecurity.com. That's BRAKEING security.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And you can, check us out, on our Slack by sending us an invite to bds.podcast@gmail.com, or you can send us a DM on our Facebook, Twitter, our Twitter handle, BreakSec. So I think that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. I know we're getting down to the wire here. Hope you're enjoying your upcoming holidays. Take care of yourselves, and that's what this podcast was all about, was taking care of yourselves and making sure that you're in a safe place, both physically and mentally. You need to take care of yourself, because as we always say here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.